It's pouring here in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. We're not sure if the rain is trying to ease some pain, is it trying to wash away some stain, or is trying to, well, help the seeds so that it can bring some grain. But we welcome you to your perfect day starter, the Morning Brief, right here on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Of course, I'm not alone this morning. Bukola is also here.
Yeah, hi, Kayode. Good morning. You know, when you're hungry for a sign, a good sign amid difficult circumstances, when one comes, then you'll embrace it. As we embrace the rain on this 29th day of May, a day marking 26 years, I believe, of unbroken democracy. But of course, you know that actual Democracy Day will be celebrated in a matter of days from now. 2 weeks, I believe, since 2018, when on June the 6th of that year, the former administration declared that henceforth Democracy Day will be celebrated on June the 12th to honor the memory of the acclaimed winner of the June 12, 1993 election, MKO Abiola. So we'll be asking those very critical questions on your behalf this morning. Who has democracy actually benefited? Would it be the man at the lowest rung of the ladder and his family, or the elite? So those very critical questions, you know, covering many sectors. So a good way to welcome you to your perfect morning starter. I am Bukola Koga.
Well, clearly a lot that will unfold for you, but we'll take a break, and when we return, we'll tell you what exactly it is we have for you on the program today. It's exactly 2 years since President Bola Tinubu became president. So stay with us. We'll be right back. So let's jump right into it. Exactly this day, 2 years ago, President Bola Tinubu stood before Nigerians at the Eagle Square in Abuja, and in his words said, "This day is bold and majestic, yet bright and full of spirit, as is our precious nation." So 2 years down the line, how is that statement holding for the everyday Nigerian? Yes, it's midterm for President Bola Tinubu. 2 years. What has he done better? What has he failed to do? What has he performed averagely on? Now, these are the questions that Nigerians will be sharing with us. Of course, we'll be putting them to those in authority. 2 years down the line, how far so far?
Well, one of those things that will be asking whether or not has been done better will be security under this administration. And so security forces, well, according to reports, are making progress in the fight against terrorism after 4 Pakistani nationals suspected of training Boko Haram and ISWAP fighters were arrested. We'll be speaking with a former director of Army Public Relations to assess the significance of these arrests, as well as what more needs to be done to win this fight in an enduring manner, this fight against insecurity.
Well, Nigeria, yes, celebrating 26 years of unbroken democracy, but the ECOWAS yesterday also celebrated its golden jubilee. The Economic Community of West African States celebrated its 50th anniversary in Lagos yesterday, and President Tinubu reaffirmed Nigeria's strong commitment to regional integration and development. So we'll be looking at how Nigeria has fared in the ECOWAS under this administration.
And of course, there's more to come as we review justice reforms under the Renewed Hope agenda. To what extent is this administration upholding court orders? Sounds like a familiar conversation, right? But of course, it doesn't diminish the importance of the question. So we'll be reflecting on that as well on the program today.
Oh, yes. So you can be a part of the show as always. From time to time, you see our email on the screen, and of course our WhatsApp numbers as well. And our question for you today is simple. 2 years into the Renewed Hope administration, 2 years into President Bola Tinubu's government, how have you fared? Are you better off than you were 2 years ago? Is your business better off than it was 2 years ago? Is the infrastructure, particularly the ones which the federal government is responsible for around you, is it better off where it was 2 years ago. Now, those are the questions that we have for you. So once you see the email address on your screen and the WhatsApp number, absolutely send them in. We'll give air to your voice, your opinion, so the government really knows how well or otherwise that you rate it.
Well, those questions also can apply under the state governments in the different regions of the country. So are you better off since the election of your governor? Because we often concentrate on the federal government and, lose sight of what is really happening such that we can ask those critical questions. Remember that they have more funding since the removal of fuel subsidies. So those questions also apply to your states, your local government. Let us know. How far so far? Are you better off under this administration in the last 2 years?
Absolutely. So we'll take a moment now and we'll take the dailies. What are the front pages saying this May the 29th? Well, we'll have that for you in a moment. Stay with us. All right, our first front page on this May the 29th is a Blueprint newspaper. By the way, most of the dailies have President Bola Tinubu's face so prominent on them, but the Blueprint doesn't quite have that. Just giving you a heads up what to expect from other papers. But the big story here is quite interesting, Bukola. It's something from the previous government, or the head of the previous government, Muhammadu Buhari, who is giving President Tinubu thumbs up at midterm, urges patience on reforms. So that's how the Blueprint newspaper leads this morning. It's just right under that big picture on the front page. Buhari thumbs up Tinubu at midterm, urges patience on reforms. Senate adopts harmonized report on tax bills, passes FCT's 1.8 trillion naira budget. So yeah, it's quite interesting, that one.
Very interesting, Kadi. It really is a surprise and at the same time not really a surprise. The reason for this is the former president was visibly absent at the APC summit, and which raised a number of eyebrows about, the support or otherwise for this government ahead of the 2027 general elections, particularly because in a departure from what seems to be the norm, not a very far departure anyway. There have been alignments, defections, and support for Mr. President, as the sole candidate of the APC for the 2027 general election. And don't forget that he was absent alongside his vice when he was president. So many are asking what really is happening with the APC, with two key members, absent. But this, settles the dust and, addresses those questions. Former president is in support of this president and is, in line with other members of the administration, calling for patience for the gains of the reforms to set in. So it's interesting to watch. But of course, there are still a couple of months down to March 2027, I believe, depending on what the timetable of INEC says.
So the former president has rated President Tinubu, but as we said earlier on, you should also rate President Tinubu. Are you giving him a thumbs up or a fair gesture or a thumbs down? Let us know. You'll see the email address on your screen, the WhatsApp number as we progress. Bukola, what do you have for us?
This Nigeria is what I have for you next. And of course, as you said earlier, a number of the papers have the picture of Mr. President boldly, on their front page. And of course, take a look at the riders. You can see it on your screen there. FCT, refusal to pay taxes, my greatest challenge, says Wike. But that's not the gist. The gist really is President Bola met Tinubu at 2. Of course, he's a 73-year-old man, but at 2, meaning his administration. And there's a review there, if you can just get a close-up shot of that. Over 900,000 beneficiaries of presidential loan and grant scheme. The management of that scheme, of course, has been investigated from the reports of the House of Representatives yesterday. But there's there are quite a number of other reviews. I'll just take maybe two more of it. Over 300,000 beneficiaries of students' loan scheme, $10 billion FX debt cleared, over 440 ongoing road projects, including over 2,700 kilometers of highways, of course, being either constructed or rehabilitated under this administration. But have the gains trickled down to you? Yes, I mean you, under this administration. So that's it from the front page of this Nigeria this morning.
Yes, the other dailies have the president's picture, so really that's what you see across board for most of the dailies this morning. President Bola Tinubu at 2. Well, his administration, his government at 2. But how do you rate this government at 2? It's a big question. So let us know on the program this morning, what is your rating of President Bola Tinubu's administration? You are the third anchor on the show this morning as Nigeria marks the second year of the Tinubu government. So those are the front pages for you. Really, some of them have the same thing, as has been said earlier on, some of the same stories, the same pictorial representation from, by the way, that was from the Ministry of Information, put in the advertorial across board. But now is the time for us to rate the president from our own perspective. So there you have it, the front pages this morning. But from the front pages, I will bring you some more stories, particularly the ones trending, but that will be in just a moment. Stay with us. All right, there you have it. Let's take a look at what's trending now, some of the issues that you've been speaking to. We'll get into your responses, of course, on President Bola Tinubu's second year in government and the ratings, of course, for the state governors as well. You can throw in your lawmakers. Oh, yes, they shouldn't be missing in action at this point. So if you have your House of Reps member representing you, or your senator, or even the state assembly, now is the time to really look at their work and say, you've done well, you've not done well, these are the areas you must improve on. We are going to be taking all of that for you on the program this morning. So let's start with this video of students writing the examination late in the night. And this is just coming barely weeks after we had to do a lot of damage control from the UTME examination, the outcome, the results. You saw the JAMB registrar in tears, apologizing to students across the country. Over 300,000 of them have had to retake that examination. But here we are, you're seeing images from Taraba State, where some pupils are taking their West African Examination Council's exam at night yesterday. Oh yes, at night yesterday. As of the time. Yeah, go ahead, Bukola.
Yeah, you can see that, you know, it's rather dark considering the illumination and how it reflects on, you know, in this video. Many have expressed concern about this. As a matter of fact, you know, as part of ongoing examinations for students, Nigerian students in secondary school, there have been some papers taking even at the weekend, and you know, for those who are visiting Nigeria, it's a sort of shock for them that even exams can hold, you know, over the weekend. So questions are being asked about the appropriateness of this. And for this particular one, by the way, these students are supposed to write another exam the following day. So there are concerns. Yes, there are concerns that, you know, they have been subjected to needless stress. You know, at this time they're supposed to be studying for today's examination. So, of course, we'll put these questions through to the head of WAEC or an appropriate representative for more clarity on why these papers were delayed to this time of the night.
Let's just be clear on what happened, right? This exam was meant to have held in the morning, right? But parents came to get their awards naturally because they're thinking, where are these children? Did they go to play after the examination? And they saw that they were sitting for the English examination at 8 p.m., 9 p.m., almost until midnight. That's when we're told that they finished writing that examination. So what exactly is going on, really? I don't recall ever having to write WAEC late at night. You wonder what this will do to them emotionally, even mentally as well. I mean, how well will they be able to respond to those questions? Because some of them will be sleeping at that time, right? Or at least getting ready to go to bed to prepare for the next day. But here they are writing examination. So WAEC, a lot of explanations or explaining to do to Nigerians, because we're just trying to recover from what happened with the UTME. This again, I don't know. It doesn't look good at all.
Well, from here, let's head over to Abia State, I believe, where there's a report of a billboard having fallen on a number of rickshaws, what we know as keke or tricycles. We're not quite sure if there are casualties after that incident, but that's quite worrisome, a worrisome situation there. And which part of Abia this has happened?
In Aba.
Clarity has not been in Aba. Yeah, Aba. There you have it. And it's as if it happened also, after a downpour. So you can see a body of water there in that area.
So, of course, follow this and give you all the updates on that one. But hey, there's a brighter side to all of this. On a lighter note, Ademola Lookman, as Africa's best player, visited Lagos Island, his route, of course, and his parents' roots as well. And there you see him with his award, sharing smiles and all. And this, of course, is happening just around the time the Super Eagles played against Ghana yesterday. Won 2-1. So, yeah, we can look at sports, football, and at least be happy.
And besides being happy, we're united.
Absolutely.
We forget about hunger, even hunger during sports.
Momentarily, right?
I like the rider momentarily. We'll forget, our tribe. We'll forget our differences during football, and we're united. I wish this video was longer because it elicits a lot of joy as you watch it, and pride. Let's add that as well. Yes, indeed, one of Africa's finest, one of Africa's best. And there he is, felicitating, rejoicing with family members. This is Lagos Island, by the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to rub it in, Nigeria also won that match against Ghana. I know I said it earlier on, but hey, let me say it again. So it's great to see Nigeria doing well. It was a very tricky match, I must say, but hey, we came out victorious eventually. So congratulations to the Super Eagles. They have one more match to go eventually, and we wish them the very best. It's the Unity Cup, by the way.
Yeah.
The Unity Cup. So it's not a big competition. It's a Unity Cup, and we have a few countries participating. So, yeah.
And some of your thoughts come through at this time. Galaxy.ai says, a reminder that no matter how far you go, you can always come home. I like that.
Oh, yes. It's actually a song. There's a song to that effect from South Africa. Remember the road that leads you home. So something to maybe cheer you up on this Thursday morning, May the 29th, before we get into the hard conversations about the state of Nigeria's economy, security, basically the state of your welfare, because that's what government is all about. The security, the welfare of the citizens. How well has the Bola Tinubu administration delivered on its promise? That's what we start off with on the program this morning, and it is a full package for you. We'll talk about insecurity, terrorism. We'll talk about even regional cohesion, regional governance with ECOWAS at 50. But the elephant in the room, that's President Tinubu's administration, is big on the show this morning. So stay with us. We'll be right back. So let's get to it. May the 29th, 2 years after. How far have we gone? We're joined on the program, as you can see, right here in our Lagos studio. Ayodele Adio is the National Publicity Secretary of YP. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you on the show. And of course, we're going to be expanding the panel on the program. We have joining us Abdulhamid Mohammed, who is a business development manager, is chairman, council for traditional youth chiefs, is a national youth leader, Tinubu support organization, is live for us in our Abuja studio. Good morning, Mr. Mohammed.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Naturally, I'll begin with you, Mr. Adio. I'll have started with him because he's closer to power, but now the president is in Lagos, right? So we're closer to the president at this point. 2 years after, I took a quote from the president's speech when he came to power, when he stood there before Nigerians, not the subsidies gone bit, before he got to the subsidies gone part. And, you know, he tried to ride on the renewed hope agenda, saying, you know, there's a lot of potential, the day is bold, it holds a lot of promise for us. It's been 2 years of tasting this renewed hope, eating a huge chunk of it. How do you feel? Do you feel fulfilled? Are you full? Are you hungry? How is it tasting?
Interesting question. Well, to be honest, I think it's been a mixed bag, right? You know, it's been quite a challenging 2 years. You know, inflation, you know, hit record high, particularly food inflation. It would appear that insecurity is now on the rise again in many parts of the country, particularly the northwestern parts and the northeastern parts of the country. You find a lot of trouble spots also in the middle belt and parts of the country with the the constant attacks by Fulani militia. Now, you also look at productivity levels in the agricultural sector and you see that it's flattened, if not even collapsed. You can argue that that is also a consequence of the rise in insecurity, but you would also question how much investments, strategic investments, has gone into improving yield and productivity in the agricultural, sector. You talk about, job creation and dealing and tackling unemployment, which has been a perennial problem over the last 2 decades. You will see that also not enough has been done to create enough meaningful jobs for young people and to absorb the thousands, the hundreds of thousands of graduates that are leaving universities across the country. So to that extent, you would argue that we haven't fought poverty as much as you would like. The numbers also do not lie. GDP per capita has shrunk significantly. It's almost halved from where we were, in 2013 or 2014. So you look at all of these numbers and you see how gloomy things have been over the last 2 years. But it would also be unfair not to take into account where the administration took over from, which, was arguably from a whole. The previous administration, in many ways, had run the economy to the ground. We could argue that it's the same political party, and many of them supported most of the decisions that were taking place before they also got into office. But they took very, very bad economic decisions that led us into a hole, widening our fiscal deficit, increased poverty and unemployment, forced capital flight, and all of that. And so they would argue that, in the last 2 years, they've tried to stabilize things. And to be fair, the numbers show that, they've recorded some success in stabilizing, for instance, foreign exchange. They've also done quite a bit to begin to grow the economy. Because if you looked at the last GDP numbers, I think the economy grew at about 3.7 or 3.8%. So that shows, some level of growth in the economy. The problem, however, is that growth is not translating, into jobs and opportunities for young people because it's largely powered, by ICT and financial services that do not employ large amounts of people. So the growth has really been in small circles. People in financial services have enjoyed that growth. But, on the average, you'd see quite, to be fair, it's being a 5 over 10, especially given the fact that, and I'm scoring it that because it's been the same political party that's been in office in 10 years. And many of the people in this administration supported what had been going on in the last, 10 years. But you could also argue, like I said, that they've achieved certain significant milestones in stabilizing the economy, and you know, it can get better going forward if they shift a few fundamentals here and there.
Let me go to our Abuja studio, and you've laid a foundation. You try to touch on the major issues, the economy, inflation, jobs, security, and all of that. But Mr. Mohammed, former President Muhammadu Buhari gave a thumbs up to President Bola Tinubu. That's his own rating of President Bola Tinubu. But he says 5/10, majorly because it's not translated to jobs. Like it's not really touched the average Nigerian. So what will be your rating of President Bola Tinubu with all of the promises made, with all of the expectations? What is it for you?
Well, good morning once again. Thank you for having me. To build on what Mr. Ayodele said, I think you might assume I would be in the position of the government, as you assume I'm closer to power than you guys, but that's not entirely the case. I came here to speak without fear or favor, to be honest, on a very neutral platform. Mr. Former President gave a thumbs up to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. That's fair enough. I think, in my opinion, we do not need the anti. We need people to encourage whoever sits on the throne of power. We need people to guide, to encourage, and then to advise properly. I think constant criticisms, negative criticisms do not serve any good for any sitting president. In my opinion, I'm not entirely happy with the administration because of so many things. We're here to discuss the gains, the gaps, and the way forward. For me, the mantra has changed, but the powers haven't. Systems, structures have been changed. Subsidies have been removed without systems. The Naira has been floated without a parachute. The economy is rising, about 3.8% increase in GDP. Yes, but like Mr. Ayodele said, an increase that does not reflect in the growth of the people and the well-being of the people. There's a lot to do. And in my opinion, again, well, for Mr. President, hope is not a policy. And slogans are not solutions. So the Renewed Hope agenda has a lot to consolidate for. The Renewed Hope agenda has a lot to catch up with. There's too much politicking going on and about instead of administration. There's too much politicking going on and about instead of focusing on the real issues at hand. Policies are being made. I mean, what's going on at the national level is elite-centered policies that are favorable to only the elites but not the masses. And then you have an average Nigerian citizen that is being constantly told to endure, to adopt, and to survive. So in my opinion, these things do not translate to the reality on paper. We need to stop applauding numbers and start focusing on the reality on ground. So for President Muhammadu Buhari to come out and say thumbs up to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, fair enough. I think constant encouragement is needed. I have a completely different standpoint. Constant encouragement, constant guidance. We do not need the anti. We need unity, we need constant encouragement, and we need constant insights and guidances. So I totally agree with President Muhammadu Buhari. Constant criticisms, negative criticisms do not serve justice, do not do anybody any harm, any good, rather more harm. So, but there's a lot to consolidate for.
All right, let's switch gears now. We have joining us via Zoom, Senior Special Assistant on Digital New Media to the President, Otega Ogra. He'll be joining us any moment. But you know what, let's take some excerpts. Let's take you back 2 years ago and just listen to President Bola Tinubu speaking on his inauguration day. Let's listen to some of the things he said, and we'll break this down further. Take a listen.
For you, honored to assume the sacred mandate you have given me. My love for this nation is abiding, my confidence in its people, unwavering, and my faith in God Almighty is absolute. I They are providing needed moral strength and clarity of in those instances where even seem have reached the limit of human capacity. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this day is bold and majestic, yet bright and full of...
And that's the part where he said the day is bold and majestic. Well, Bukola, I know naturally you want to come in on this one.
Well, it's important for us to remind ourselves of, the promises made by the administration, any government in the first place. But one thing appears to be the common thread in what our guests have said so far, and that is the need for us to relax on criticism. And you talked about the gains, trickling in. And it elicits an important question. You noted that the former administration had run the economy aground. So in a sense, do you see, when you consider those indicators, some would say the reforms of this administration are bold, removal of subsidy, the floating of the naira, that the naira has actually found its true value. And last year, Nigeria recorded a drop in debt service to revenue ratio, which was significant over a period of time, although more loans have been secured now, and that is heading us further downhill. But do you sense that because of those little gains that haven't trickled down, that this particular administration of the APC government appear to be better managers of the economy? Mr. Adio.
Well, that's a difficult box to put me on. Because first of all, to be honest, we talk about the fact that they were bold to take on the removal of petrol subsidy and, of course, the floating of the currency. But the reality is that when they took office, they found themselves in the close, and there was hardly any other place to turn to. So the decisions that they had, or the decisions that they were confronted with, they had very few options. They just had to cut off petrol subsidy. Otherwise, the economy would have completely tanked, right? So they didn't have a flurry of options to take at the time. It was just what was on the table, and they just had to do what they had to do. And I concede that if you have to conduct the orchestra, you have to back the audience, right? But to your larger question, which is how has this gains, or how will these gains, trickle down going forward? The truth is, on the one hand, they are playing the trickle-down economics, and we have seen historically that the trickle-down economics doesn't really work in the long run. It hardly ever trickles down to the bottom of the pyramid, and that's why you have to pursue it simultaneously, with social policies that are able to reach the vulnerable citizens across the country and help carry those who are being left behind, because they also play a significant role. And in Nigeria's case, they form a majority in our economy, right? And like I emphasized earlier, the growth that you're seeing, largely driven by ICT and financial services, are restricted to a tiny cluster of people who have high liquidity. And so if you're very liquid today, you can easily invest in treasury bonds, treasury bills, and bonds, and easily make 20 to 30% markups, right? So it's people who are extremely liquid that are able to make significant gains from the economy. And like I said, if you can put a couple of monies in TBs and make 20 to 30%, why are you going to start a business where you're going to deal with high electricity cost, high labor cost, poor infrastructure? You're not going to do that. And so that's why you see that the economy is not creating as much jobs as it should. And that's why I'd like to see a more pragmatic approach that is targeted at major sectors of the economy that powers job creation, which is in manufacturing, which is in agriculture, which is in processing. That way, growth can be a lot more inclusive. We can create more jobs for the economy. We can drive consumption better. and we can see relative progress over time. You know, at the moment, I think we're running the risk of using data to some extent, you know, like a drunk person uses a lamppost, which is to support himself and not for illumination. And so the data that the current administration continues to harp upon is the fact that the economy has grown at 3.7%. But yes, it's true, but the reality on the streets does not reflect the growth that they are touting.
So in that sense, they're not necessarily better managers of the economy. They do not understand.
To be fair, if you compare them to what we saw in the last 8 years, it's a quantum leap to where we were, because this is the first time the economy has grown significantly in the last 10 years. So if you compare them to what was obtainable in the Buhari administration, yes, you can argue that they're far better managers of the economy. They have, to my opinion, a more competent CBN governor who is focused on his primary objective of price stability. You know, they seem to also have a few you know, square pegs and square holes that seem to have a bit more clarity about the direction of the economy. But the problem I see is the lack of cohesion. They seem to still be operating in silos in certain regards, and there isn't enough clarity on the grand scheme of things and enough harmonization of many of these policies to drive the country forward. So while there are good things happening, maybe at the CBN, maybe in some pockets at the aviation, you don't find that point of convergence, you know, that propels us forward collectively. And maybe a better harmonization you know, of the agenda of the team, perhaps a bit of rejig in setting positions, you're likely to see better performance going forward.
All right, let's take this to Mr. Hamid. Mr. Abdul Hamid, I'm sure this, you know, sort of gladdens your heart. Do you agree that this has been constructive criticism and not antagonism towards this administration? But more importantly, you know, from the gains that haven't trickled down to, you know, the Nigerian at the bottom of the ladder, do you sense that under this administration there seems to be a fairer understanding of how to manage the economy compared to the last APC government?
Well, to be honest, I totally agree with him, and I'm in support of constructive criticism, like I rightly mentioned at the beginning. And yes, there is stability, and stability is very important for every economy. And beyond stability, let's analyze Mr. President as a person, not as a leader. There's a lot of control as well, and there's a lot of order. And no matter how disproportionate, yet order is order. It is very essential. So there's stability, there's control, and there's order. But what we lack, or what Mr. President lacks, is efficiency in the administration. The power has been so focused, so centralized, that, like he rightly said, there isn't a cohesion, there isn't a point of convergence. You could see gains in economies, you could see gains in 1 or 2 areas, but there isn't enough efficiency, simply because there is control, there is order, 2 very crucial components, but there isn't efficiency. It percolates down also, not just in the entire economy, but also down to the youth wing, down to the politics, because all of these are critical components of the administration itself. Does it translate to the well-being of the people? No. Again, like I said, in my opinion, these are elite-centered policies being marketed to us as bold reforms, where only the elite are benefiting from it. A 2-3% growth in GDP as opposed to a 30% rise in inflation does not translate to any meaningful growth. It is nothing but elite insulation. I do not think they're in sync with the populace. I do not think they're in sync with the masses. I do not think that there's a lot of bridges to build. Rising cost of food prices, insecurity, I mean the devaluation of the naira that led to hike in inflation and all of these things. So we have statistics. God bless my late aunt, Haja Halita. I think we were once having a meeting where she said, in her opinion, Nigeria is the only place that statistics do not work. And I totally agree with her. The numbers show this, but the reality shows otherwise. So I do not think the masses are enjoying the benefits of these policies. I do not think the masses are enjoying the benefits of these reforms. Policies where only multinationals and corporations and the wealthy benefit are not for the good of the people entirely. It is just an elite installation, like I mentioned earlier. So,
okay, let's take this to Mr. Ortega Ogra, who joins us virtually now.
Criticisms.
And I think both gentlemen, you've touched on data, statistics. So, Mr. Ogra, you're welcome to the program. We've seen some of the front pages of the dailies and the achievements reeled out by the Ministry of Information, basically talking about some of the gains that this administration has recorded from the government's perspective now. But if you've listened to both gentlemen, they have spoken about how, you know, these achievements, whether you talk GDP, are not trickling down to the everyday Nigerian in that sense, right? Mr. Adio here spoke about, you know, data is being used as a drunkard uses a lamppost for support instead of for illumination. Mr. Mohammed in Abuja spoke about how, you know, statistics really, from his opinion and his aunt's, does not work in Nigeria. And I remember President Tinubu then, as a candidate, saying, now statistics we go chop. Now the tables have turned, and I imagine Nigerians asking, now statistics we go chop.
So thank you very much. I think for me, the most important thing that we should not lose sight of is context. Context brings everything into better perspective. And I'll start by, you know, let's look at the economy in itself. This was a country that we were spending, our debt service revenue ratio was almost 100%. Meaning that for every kobo for every naira we're earning, we had less than a kobo, you know, to do every single thing that we needed to do, whether it's infrastructure development, whether it's, you know, putting money into other developmental areas and all that. But the most important thing to know is that that has been fixed. As at the end of 2024, that has come down to about 40%. Now, this is despite the fact that there was a almost $7 billion backlog that investors could not repatriate to the countries. There were debts that were hanging on our necks, short-term debts with very high interest rates that were hanging on our necks. There were salaries that needed to be increased so that people could have more monies in their hands and all that. So that had to be tackled first before we could do anything. And two things had to go. The fuel subsidies, which was a huge joke and the biggest scam that this country has ever faced, and the multiple exchange rate windows. And, you know, it just made the economy so uncompetitive. So that was fixed. That was the first, you know, action that Mr. President did. Both sides, you know, abolished the multiple FX windows, allowed the naira to find its true value, even though it's, some will say it's on the price right now. And then on the other hand, remove the fuel subsidies. And, you know, just know that Nigerians are paying exactly what they needed to pay. Fuel prices went up. It came a little bit of inflation. It came some increase in prices and all those things. But the most important thing to know is that since the fuel subsidies have been removed, fuel prices have come down to about half what it were as the time it went very up. So from 1,008, 1,009 to about 800, 900 now, which was the amount that was even being sold in some parts of this country when the subsidies were still in play, when we're still wasting 13 trillion naira on subsidies. So yeah, data, you might say now statistics will go chop. I mean, that was a very interesting jibe from Mr. President. But the most important thing is you need data to be able to plan. You need data to know where you're coming from and where you're going to. And so far, so good. I would say we've done pretty well, given the challenges.
All right, we'll try to reconnect with Mr. Ogra. It was making a very important point. All right, you can continue now, Mr. Ogra.
Thank you. I said the minimum wage has been increased to 70,000, and you know, across all levels it goes up. Fuel prices have come down to 800, 900 from about 1,004 to 1,008, and a host of other things like that. And what does that do? And we're moving to a credit economy, most importantly, as well as, you know, trying to widen our tax base, like the president said in his famous speech that a lot of people tried to misrepresent a couple of years back during his colloquium. So right now, your tax to GDP is about 13.5%. It's the highest it's ever been. You know, we're doing the biggest tax cuts in history, you know, for Nigerians. You know, when you're earning below a certain amount as an individual or a corporate, you know, you tend to have, with these tax cuts, you have a lot more money in your hands to do a lot of things. And if you say, oh, it's not trickling down, how do you account for the increase in volumes by FMCG companies? Because some people want to say, oh, the profits they're declaring at the end of 2024 is as a result of increase in prices. But you look at the hard numbers and then you see that volumes have increased across board, from your retail FMCGs to things like cement, which is for infrastructure and all those things. Those are, for me, better pointers to how the common man is receiving this than something else. We were talking about food inflation and all that. Yes, I would agree. There was quite a huge food inflation from 2023 up until towards the end of last year. And why was this happening? It's not government, it's people like you and I who created a new economy out of being middlemen. The regular farmer on the streets just wants to sell, in the village or wherever he is, just wants to sell his produce after harvest. Look at rice, for instance. Rice has a 3 months post-harvest period. We had a situation whereby a new group of people went there, started to buy paddy rice, started to store this, and wait till the end of the harvest season, and then start to bring it out to sell at, arbitrary prices to the people. Those were Nigerians doing a disservice to Nigerians. So what did the president do for that? He gave a 6 months temporary waiver to be able to bring in certain commodities. Some people said, oh, this will affect the farmers disproportionately. And I say, no. Nigeria has had, despite the increase in rice production, which is to the credit of the last administration, Nigeria has still had a 1 to 2 million tons deficit in terms of rice production year on year. So what that did is it provided paddy rice, the temporary waivers, it provided paddy rice for farmers or for rice millers to be able to mill. Don't forget that a lot of these rice millers have loans that they took from banks to set up their businesses. Without them being able to mill because of the actions of people that were hoarding paddy rice, it simply meant that they were at a risk of losing their businesses. The banks were the rice millers were at a risk of having their businesses foreclosed. That is not what we want. So one thing that Mr. President has done is look at the economy as a whole. We're not picking things. I know you say there doesn't seem, the last speaker said it doesn't look like there's cohesion to things, but I actually want to disagree. What you're saying is we have to clean up the ruts and build from the ground up. Yes, you might not be seeing as many people in the masses, getting as much money to put around, but we are also seeing the data is there to show that Nigerians have more monies in their hands. There's a credit code there. There's a school. Yes, please.
Some of the data that you have put out may be punctured by current realities, and which is what I'd like to take you up on. You talk about debt service revenue ratio haven't dropped, but there's been plans to obtain additional $24 billion loan, which could also take us a bit further downhill. That's on the one hand. You talk about increase in minimum wage. Hold on, just hold on there. Hold on. Hold on, pardon me. Mr. Otega,
something that is wrong.
70, you talk about increase in minimum wage, which to 70,000 naira. It's not particularly to the true that it has been implemented across board. The more money being in the hands of Nigerians also could be punctured by current realities. How far has the administration implemented its conditional cash grant scheme? So these, you also cited increase in a reduction in pump price of petrol. Don't forget that if there's an increase in in crude oil in the international market, this temporary reduction that Nigerians are experiencing may just, be punctured yet again with an increase in the pump price of petrol. So the more important question, as your co-panelists have asked, is: has it trickled down to the average Nigerian? And if not, how long do Nigerians have to wait?
So thank you very much. Before I respond to the main question, I just want to correct something. I think as the media, we have a responsibility to be able to push information that is right, information that is factual, information that doesn't cause more ambiguity, with the people. The president has not gone to borrow, is not going to seek approval to borrow the amounts. What he has done is present a medium-term framework to the National Assembly saying, given the improvement in our in our economy right now, in the work we're doing, this is what's both from the federal government and the states and other subnationals. These are the likely areas where we might need that. It doesn't mean that the government is going to borrow that money. It doesn't mean that that money will be borrowed at once. I mean, that money could even be spread over the next 8, 10 years, as the case may be. But that is a projection, because it doesn't make sense for any government to go to the National Assembly every single time it wants to, approach the markets for debt or something to do that. So please, it's very important that we teach our people very well, that we, project the right information to the people. Again, I repeat, it's not the big corporations that are buying your household and consumer items at home. These are regular people. How are we seeing increase in volumes across a lot of consumer goods today in Nigeria? It's simply because people have more disposable income. And you have to look at it as, again, you have to look at it as a whole. 70,000 has been approved for the wage increase. Some states are actually paying higher than 70,000. I think a few states are paying just slightly below that, but that's the minimum wage. How many people are in that bracket? As you go up, the ladder, you see people have also more increased income to them. So there's the shift to a credit economy. Today, we have millions of students, who have applied and who have been granted, the student loans. What that simply means is that for every student on the NELFund, portal that has been approved that is getting the student loans, it simply means that family of that student has more disposable income to them to spend. And that's what we're seeing reflects in the increase in, volumes that are being sold and demand for consumer good items and food items. So we need to look at things in context. And as the media, it's our job, it's our responsibility to get the full context and inform, educate people properly. So that's that.
Right.
In a nutshell, sorry?
Because of time, we have to wind down. We had hoped you'd join us earlier, so we would have like a comprehensive conversation, have a good back and forth with the gentleman in the studio, but we're constrained by time, and that's understandable. But we have to thank you so much. I know that the president has released a statement to mark this day, so don't be shocked if we're having you back tomorrow to speak more to these issues. So we have to thank you so much, as at this time, we'll be speaking with the Senior Special Assistant. By the way, you'll be joining us tomorrow, right? If we call on you.
That's fine, I'll always be here.
Absolutely. Mr. Ortega Ogura is a Senior Special Assistant on Digital New Media to the President, joins us virtually, but this is by no means the end of this conversation. We've also had in our Abuja studio, Abdulhamid Mohammed, as a National Youth Leader, Tinubu Support Organization, Chairman Council for Traditional Youth Chiefs, and here in our Lagos studio, Mr. Ayodele Adio, National Publicity Secretary of U Party. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I'm glad we're able to have a youthful panel to discuss these very important issues, so thank you once again.
Thank you.
We'll take a moment now on the show, and when we return, we'll talk security, terrorism, the prevention of it. What is the government doing? What is happening with all of the networks? That's in a moment. Please stay with us.
Welcome back. And so as we continue to reflect on the performance of this administration in different sectors, one of the very critical area to assess would be security. There has been some progress made, but how impactful is this progress, and what more needs to be done to ensure that security of life and property is more enduring for the long run, rather than pocket gains? So let's have this conversation this morning as we have joining us Brigadier General Sani Usman, former Director of Army Public Relations and spokesman for the Nigerian Army, who joins us from our Abuja studio. You see him there. Brigadier Usman, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Defense headquarters had said, just weeks ago that there is a foreign dimension, to the unrest, in fact, consistent attacks that we've experienced in Plateau, in Benue, and in other parts of the Northwest. And following this, we've now experienced, we're hearing about the arrest of 4 Pakistani nationals, who are training Boko Haram of ISWAP extraction. This, of course, brings another dimension to the fight against insecurity. What are your reflections on this? And specifically, what is the implication of this latest development?
Good morning once again. I think the implication is very, very worrisome in the sense that because it has so many dimensions. Initially, people thought it was just a local problem, populated by mostly, Nigerian youth, and now having international affiliation, even though we have had this since 2016, when a faction of the Boko Haram terrorist group paid allegiance to ISWAP, to ISIS, and of course, metamorphosized into ISWAP. So automatically, the international dimension has always been there, but this new one, having arrested quite a few number of foreigners. And I made mention of this long time ago that there were foreigners arrested because we have had the information. It's just that the military did not come out with the information until now because of the process of investigation to determine the level and the extent to which they have been involved. Because first there is issue of gun running and of course intelligence, and including training and the use of sophisticated weapons. Take for instance the issue of drone, not necessarily for surveillance but also armed drones. So this is a very worrisome and disturbing development, but I can rest assure you that notwithstanding, given the fact that the number is insignificant, I think it's something that need to be looked from various dimensions, in the sense that there is need to critically evaluate how do they even come into this country and who are their internal collaborators and what are their external collaborators. And I'm so happy that people are beginning to understand that actually the counter-insurgency or the fight against terrorism and insurgency in this country, it is not just for the security agencies or the military. These criminal elements are determined to destabilize Nigeria and Nigerians, as it were. Therefore, it requires collective efforts on the part of each and every one of us. That means we look at who are those involved. How do they even come about? Initially we have had instances, people from within the continent, particularly West African sub-region, participating in this heinous crime. Now it is beyond the African continent, and given the experience they have had, Pakistan has been at loggerhead, with India for almost 78 years, and whoever their terrorists are well experienced, and so for them to bring in their experience and knowledge to add to what we have in the local problem we have, it is very, very disturbing and worrisome. But I am so happy with the call for action on the part of the security agencies, particularly the Theater Command, in which they are making concerted effort to see whether there will be more international collaboration to stem this tide.
All right. Mr. Usman, you have, retired Brigadier General, pardon me, you have said something significant, that, the intention is to destabilize Nigeria. So whether it's, Pakistani nationals training Boko Haram in the country, or it is foreign elements of, foreign Fulani extraction on the North Central causing mayhem, that seems to be the end game. But to what extent, why do foreign mercenaries, why are they hired to destabilize Nigeria? I think that is the more important question. What do they stand to gain?
is an economic situation or an economic system that revolves around complex situation. Whenever there is problem, there are people that, despite the fact that it brings suffering, death, and destruction, to some people it is just a business opportunity. So people benefit from it. Sometimes, and in most instances, even the efficacy of the terrorists, that of a foreign terrorist has no compassion, has no affiliation with Nigerians, so definitely they are far more wicked as compared to those local terrorists, that populated Boko Haram. So that is issue number one. Secondly, of course, naturally, you cannot bring in people from elsewhere without paying them. To them, we have had instances, Nigerians going out of their way to go and fight in other countries, for instance, Ukraine and elsewhere, simply because the motivation of pecuniary gain is there. Then the third and most important aspect is the issue of ideology. Remember, Boko Haram is determined to create an Islamic state within the Nigerian state. So automatically, anybody with likely ideology or mindset would like to contribute his or her best to the cause of the Boko Haram terrorists. So these are the things. Then the other fourth one is the issue of international dimension. It's the issue of conspiracy theory, whether we like it or not, is there. Nigeria has a great potential to be one of the greatest countries on this earth. Why? Because God has blessed us with two important things: the mineral resources and the human resources. And the most important aspect of it is the human resources, because Nigerians, they are very, very creative, very resilient, very intelligent. And that is why pick any country. So these developed countries, you will see that there is a Nigerian there in the helms of affairs contributing his or her best in any way possible. Now, people do not want Nigeria to be in peace, because by the time we live in peace and harmony with one another, the potential in us, the creativity in us will be, unleashed for the development of this country, and we take on the world. So a lot of people are apprehensive, including those that are our neighbors within the West African continent, the African continent, and of course the world at large. You remember the various efforts, prediction that Nigeria will disintegrate way back almost 20 years ago, and we are still standing. And in fact, there is a story of a former Secretary General of UN who said he prepared to stay in Nigeria. They asked him why. When he retired, he said, look, this is a country that has had crisis that ordinarily it would have broken up 100 times over and is still standing. So a lot of people are not too comfortable with Nigeria to be, united and progressive. So these are the things that we want every Nigerian to understand, that look, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that Nigeria remains a united country so that we can, realize our potentials, so that we will live in peace and contribute to the well-being of our society, and of course to peace and security in the world. Remember, some time back, Nigeria was the first true contributing country to the United Nations peacekeeping effort, and so many others, and you name it. So basically, when you put all this together, you will understand the reasons or the motivation for, foreigners to come into the country to contribute in any way they can to the stabilization of this country. And remember again, one other and the most saddest aspect of it is the fact that Nigerians are working at cross purposes with each other. And we are calling on those in the position of authority: you don't fight a battle of this nature with a divided house. When it comes to issue of security, right, everybody ought to be on the same page, devoid of extraneous variables of religion or ethnicity, as it were. So basically, these are the issue. Simply because you are not in government, sometimes we feel like, no, it is us versus them, or even in the Nigerian society, in most instances, it is the military or the security forces against the criminal elements. No, these people are fighting on our behalf, so it is the Nigerian state as it is. And you and me constitute what the Nigerian state is.
And that's a very important mindset to have if we'll win this fight. This conversation is happening smack in the middle of President Bola Tinubu's midterm. So naturally, it holds a lot of significance, because when you want to rate any government, you start with the security of things, of lives, property, you talk economy, welfare, and all of that. So security is a major pillar of any government, one that it must not joke with. I wanted to speak to those who may find this as a convenient excuse, this foreign dimension part of it, because they'll tell you that foreign interference is almost as constant as day and night. There would always be some foreign entity, individual, organization trying to destabilize any country at any given day. I mean, that is constant. That's what you have. Even the United States experiences this. All countries experience this. So it's a constant thing. So having this come up yet again may be curious to some people who say, well, that's why we have government, right, to ensure that both threats in-house and from outside are dealt with. So I want you to speak to that specifically now. For those who find this as a convenient excuse, isn't that why we have government? What is government doing, particularly this administration, to ensure that whether it's foreign interference or from home, they are dealt with decisively?
You see, I'm so grateful for this kind of question, and the fact that, because it speaks to the heart of the issues of the challenges, particularly security challenges that we are having in this country. The issue of collective responsibility. The thing is that, yes, people have been, there are those who are statutorily responsible for the, safety and security in this country. But of course, they are not magicians. It is a collective responsibility, even though they take lead in the sense that given sense of direction and strategy and allocation of resources, and so be it. But the long and short of it is that it is a collective responsibility. Each component has a role to play. Take, for instance, right from the family system, the educational system, and of course, even at workplaces and all the rest, and the professional groups, each and every one of them has a role to play, because everything that we are doing, you can never have a meaningful development or progress without, acceptable level of security in this country. And unfortunately, it's the issue is still work in progress, in the sense that we have not reached the desired end. And most unfortunately, again, geopolitics has come into play. But I think the most important thing is to put our house in order. Let us all be united. Let Nigerians have greater sense of belonging. And of course, improving the social, economic well-being so that they can contribute their best. And in any case, the people who really, patriotic, hardworking, and determined to make sure that Nigeria works are not enticed or, distracted by the criminal elements within the society. And in any case, they are insignificant number. So, and the earlier we conscientize ourselves, mobilize the Nigerian society so that we will be, united in dealing with the security challenges, the better. Then, of course, those that are in position of responsibility also have a great role to play. Take, for instance, pick any of the security challenges. What are their root causes? What are their motivations? Sometimes they are local issues. Look at how we have been, going up and down or back and forth with the issue of local government autonomy. Whereas we know it, by the time the local governments are up and doing optimally, definitely bulk of the security challenges could have been mitigated, because people have the capacity of dealing with local issues locally. So that is it. And beyond that, again, over time we have been emphasizing on kinetic aspect of dealing with security challenges. What of the non-kinetic aspect? And I always like to relate it. Take, for instance, the counter-insurgency effort, where let's put it on scale of 100%. The kinetic aspect, which is the security or the coercion, is more or less like less than 40%. So what happened to the 60%? And that is where the issue lies. And we have to look at it from that perspective. And there are, grievances among the components of Nigerian society, and we are not addressing them. And I hope places like Plateau, now with the fact-finding mission, it is not just enough to have them, but whenever there are far-reaching recommendations with implementation strategies, they should be followed up, unless, of course, if they are not realistic. So we have to go back to the drawing board and look at all those issues. Why are we having this problem? What have we been doing about about it. Take, for instance, even the issue of community policing. And now it has not been followed, through since 2013. Now state governments are left with their own initiatives. And it shouldn't be so. Because if you look at the constitutional provisions, there is also, the provision for police council.
All right.
Police council is a constitutional, provision to be headed by the president, and of course state governors are all members. How many times have they met within the last 25 years? Some of these problems could be traced locally, but unfortunately we are chasing shadows in some instances unless we go back to the core value, the issue of good governance, so that we can deal with these security challenges as it were.
Very, very critical reminders that you have put forward, Brigadier General Usman. The constitution of the Police Council, the failure to meet, to deliberate on critical issues of security, and of course, the non-kinetic aspect. We could expand these issues further, but we must anchor at this point and return to them yet again to serve as a reminder for, the relevant agencies and indeed the government that deploys them. We've been talking with Brigadier General Sani Kukasheka Usman, retired, former Director of Army Public Relations and former spokesman for the Nigerian Army. Thank you so much, sir, for coming through on this one.
Thank you so much.
There's more to reflect on as far as the gains or the lack of it after 2 years of this administration. When we return, we'll take a break from that and, go to the regional level and look at the gains of West African states after 50 years. It's an important conversation to have. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There's a lot on President Bola Tinubu's table. I imagine it's overflowing, both nationally and regionally. I'm talking about the ECOWAS. 50 years since ECOWAS. How far so far? Yes, we're joined by Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, former Permanent Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat, the Presidency, Charge d'Affaires, Embassy of Nigeria, The Hague, Netherlands. Good morning, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us on the program. Well, the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of ECOWAS, incidentally, coincides with President Bola Tinubu's second anniversary as president of Nigeria, which is why I said he has a lot on his table. But let's talk about the regional issues now. Shifting alliances, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger quit the bloc earlier this year, but ECOWAS is still trying to pull together. Now, the issues confronting ECOWAS include security, or should I say insecurity. There's economic issues as well, trade. You have traders who want to move goods to Niger, for example, paying multiples as taxes. So what a time it is for President Bola Tinubu, who is the chair of ECOWAS. But I want you to speak to us from that event yesterday. What were you able to glean in terms of what the future looks like for ECOWAS?
Thank you for having me. I hope you are hearing me.
Yes, please.
I didn't hear most of your, yes, I didn't hear most of your introduction. But first, permit me. Let me just answer your question about ECOWAS. But let me just say that I actually feel sometimes very upset and furious when I hear retired military officers come on national television and begin to blame foreigners for our crisis, for our problems, for our insecurity. I think it's ingenious. We are the source of our problem, pure and simple, and leadership failure across board, particularly the military themselves, should know better than misinforming Nigerians about foreigners being responsible for our crisis. We are purely, simply responsible for our own, insecurity problem in this country, and our continuous refusal to address it has even made it worse, costing so many lives. But regards to, to ECOWAS, I think there is, there might not be too many things to celebrate, but I think that the little that ECOWAS has achieved is worth celebrating, particularly the free movement of goods and services. persons, goods, and services. When you consider, for example, that if there's no ECOWAS, just to go to Cotonou here, or to go to Ghana, which a couple of years ago used to, from here to Cotonou used to take, from Lagos, used to take less than an hour plus, will be compelled, Nigerians will be compelled to take about 15 or 16 visas all the time, but the free movement of goods and services, of persons, goods and services, the trade liberalization, and some of the infrastructure, connecting the region, has actually helped, contributed a lot to increase in trade. Yes, it is true that when you look at the statistics, the recorded trade, between among ECOWAS countries, it's not as high as the informal trade. And that's because, again, over the years, both countries along the sub-region and the authorities have failed to put in place mechanisms that can ensure that they bring an end to smuggling and conduct trade professionally, and business-like, like the rest of the world. I mean, what we are going through is not different from what other countries have gone through, but they've dealt with it, the best they can. And we are, I've always said, Nigerians, Africans, we are not pioneers in anything as of today. But the truth of the matter is that we can actually cut and paste and see what others are doing, to ensure that we operate based on international best practices. So the informal trade is greater than recorded trade. But the truth of the matter is that there's been a substantial increase in trade among ECOWAS countries. So my position and our position among retired career ambassadors of Nigeria, whom I represent, is that yes, ECOWAS has enough experience today to face the challenges of the future, which of course it's part of it is what you started with, insecurity or security, whichever one we want to use.
You make a vital point there, and really, the president is meant to basically set the tone as the chair, Nigeria, most influential, largest nation in the ECOWAS. But when the ECOWAS has lost 20% of its strength, in the sense of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger leaving. In fact, I was referring to trade. A trader, for example, going from Kano to Niger will tell you before probably used to pay 100,000 naira as taxes, now paying times 500,000 naira as taxes. Smuggling now is a bigger deal than it used to be, because you understand the strained relationship, right? So there isn't that kind of communication. So when you look at the losses in that sense, I'm trying to find the best way to capture this question. Is the ECOWAS still as strong as it is, or we're getting to a point where we might be seeing more countries leave because they think, well, maybe the ECOWAS is not as strong or as pivotal to regional development as they had imagined or they expect it to be?
Regrettably, I didn't get your question. I think there's the internet is not steady. But if I get you correctly, are you asking about how can we make ECOWAS stronger or something like that?
Well, sort of, but I wanted to speak to the shifting alliances particularly, and I was referring to, again, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger. I spoke about a trader now who has to take goods from Kano to Niger, paying times 5 in taxes. Smuggling has increased. So there are other countries who are watching and thinking, okay, can we do better outside of ECOWAS? Patrick, that's my question really for countries who are looking and thinking, is ECOWAS still as influential? Will it guarantee regional development?
No, look, we absolutely, we can do better. And that's part of what I tried to say initially, that it all depends. Look, it's a process. Forming this economic integration, it's a process. And it requires a lot of commitment and the preparedness of the authorities on all sides, Nigeria and the rest of its ECOWAS brothers and sisters. It requires them to do the right thing. Look, if you go from if you go from the United Kingdom to Brussels, to the Netherlands, to Germany, to France, you see exactly what they have done, to address the problems you have raised. What we need to do is to do something similar. Look, we've been discussing this for a couple of years. Again, I make the point that the authorities on all sides are not yet ready to do the right thing. It's a question of doing the right thing. It's not as if we do not know what to do. The European Union has been in existence for for how many years? They've addressed this problem you've raised, and now what we need to do is to ensure that we do just as simple as it is to do this right thing. A couple of years ago, Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, I think Togo, we signed a quadripartite agreement to address the very issues you have raised. I can almost take a bet that no custom official in this country has ever seen that document or cared about it. And so that's part of the failure. So it's not just that ECOWAS can work if the authorities, in every country decide that they want to make it work. So we can eliminate all the taxes as it is in the ECOWAS agreement. But the authorities in each region, in each state, has to ensure that they obey the community rules, just like the European Union and the other, unions around the world are doing. So if we can just get ourselves to do that, I think that we can resolve the problem you have raised.
Ambassador Keshi, relatedly, when experts reflect on ECOWAS and the progress and challenges, it is difficult not to compare when you hear them speak about the glory days of ECOWAS when they reigned in on Gambia decades ago, following the abuse of democracy there. And, they talk about Liberia and Sierra Leone. But the same has not been the case for, the challenges to democracy in recent times when you talk about countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and the likes. So the question is, has ECOWAS lost its steam, and is it still committed to the values for which it was founded? At a critical time when we'll be needing his expertise on this particular question, the network is not always clement. Hello, Mr. Keshi? Ambassador Keshi, did you get the question?
I didn't get the question, but I think I kind of get the direction. You're asking about whether
is it still committed to the values of democracy?
ECOWAS. I guess your question is their impact or effect on ECOWAS. And no, my position is very simple on this. From day one when they left, I made a point in every time I had the opportunity to say very clearly, predictably, that with time they will come back to ECOWAS. They cannot isolate themselves. If ECOWAS begin to work as expected, they would themselves appreciate the fact that they need to return to the community because they will benefit from being part of the community. Right now, they are upset over a couple of things, but with time, with maturity, with the reality staring them in the face, I believe that they will come back. I'm not saying that ECOWAS should not try to get them back, but the truth of the matter is that they have reasons. I mean, they are sovereign states. They have reasons to be upset on how they were treated. Remember, for example, when you take Niger, some of us were actually alarmed, when we started talking of military, incursion or military, operations against Niger. And sometimes I say to myself, those who actually came up with that idea, particularly Nigeria and Niger, have no sense of history, absolutely no sense of history, to understand why we should not even have contemplated military operation going to Niger. And I'm glad to say that eventually good reasons, prevailed.
Right.
But I make the point very strongly that with time, and if ECOWAS begins to work as expected and as it should be, that these three countries will return back to, to ECOWAS. It's a matter of time. They would come back. Look, remember that on its own, Mauritania pulled away from ECOWAS. It was the same Mauritania that came back to request for, is it partnership or something like that, because they realized that at the end of the day, you cannot have the community working. And then you, landlord countries, you need some of these countries to allow your goods to come in.
Well, Ambassador, this is what we'll do. If and when they do return, you're going to be the first on this show to have a conversation with, to speak to that. But we have to thank you so much, because this conversation is also vital to the rating of President Bola Tinubu, who is the chair of ECOWAS. But hope is something to also hold on to. But we have to thank you once again, Ambassador Joe Keshi, for sharing your thoughts with us on the program.
Welcome back, and as we continue to reflect on progresses and challenges after 2 years of the Bola Tinubu administration, this time we'll look at justice reforms, or more specifically, the place of the rule of law. And it sounds like an all too familiar conversation. Does the executive obey the rule of law? Do they uphold the rule of law when they assume office? Let's have this conversation this morning. And joining us, we have Mr. Jude Udo Ilo, is the Chief Executive Officer, Hague Institute for Innovation, OG Law Hill. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Ilo, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as I said earlier, it sounds like an all too familiar conversation under each administration. You could reflect on court cases, the arrest of politically exposed persons, detention without trial. Is it a foregone conclusion, really, that the executive under each administration sort of turns its back on the rule of law? What are your thoughts on this?
So thank you. I think it is important to also situate this conversation on what is happening globally, where you see a tendency by a lot of countries to prioritize, in their view, the agenda of governments or the policies of government above the restraints that have been put in place by the law, by the constitution, as the case may be. And so the global backsliding of respect for rule of law is something that is quite prevalent across the world. We are seeing increasingly a number of authoritarian democracies, if I may call them that, where leaders believe that because they have the mandate of the people, or assume they have the mandate of the people, and to that extent they don't feel restrained, or they don't think they can be restrained by judges, as the case may be. And we've heard narratives like unelected people cannot tell elected people what to do. So it is a global problem. It's not just a Nigeria problem. And the tendency oftentimes is that government is often focused on getting things done as quickly as possible, getting political wins, without paying due attention to what the law says, without paying due attention to process. Now, the problem is that you can very well get things done without paying due attention to those processes, but you then create a system where every individual can decide for themselves what is in the best interest of the country, whether or not the law allows it. As long as they feel their cause is righteous, in quotes, they go ahead and do whatever they want. And so that problem is also pervasive, not just in Nigeria, but across the world. And in Nigeria, we see the tendency of government to focus more on we are getting things done than following due process, then creating a culture that puts discretion, individual discretions, above the dictates of the law. And that in itself is problematic. That in itself is dangerous for democracy.
Getting things done could be debatable. If we have more time, I'd like to follow up on that. But let's expand the conversation to the judicial space itself and look at the role of the judiciary in sort of fueling this restraints that you talk about. When we look at critical court cases and we, list, for want of time, we may not be able to list the ex parte orders that we've had in the last decade over very critical cases. They talk about forum shopping and the obtaining of certain court orders, to frustrate the justice system. What do you perceive to be the role of the judiciary itself in enhancing this restraint, this lack of restraint? I beg your pardon.
So the first thing is that the rule of law is not just about people obeying the law. It's also about the executive imposing on themselves some level of restraint. They should not necessarily exercise their power. Government officials should exercise their power with restraints. And that's where you help the courts. You don't overwhelm the courts with countless cases coming their way. But particularly to your question, I mean, the statistics are out there. The Nigerian judiciary is viewed very unfavorably by majority of Nigerians. It is hemorrhaging credibility. And I think it is an own goal, if I may call it that. It's a self-inflicted wound, because as to your point, they've allowed people to manipulate the system with things like forum shopping. They have been inconsistent in following precedents. They have been inconsistent in holding government accountable, actually. And so it is, I think it's more of a credibility problem for the judiciary. And what they need to do, of course, is to clean up the act. I think Nigeria has one of the best set of laws and processes and procedures. What has happened over the years is that these rules are observed more in breach than in proper compliance. And so for the judiciary to regain its place and, take back the credibility it once enjoyed, it has to clean up its acts. First of all, it has to be a court of the people in the actual sense of the word. It has to be a court of justice. It has to be, in this era of inconsistency and unpredictability of the global community, justice should be a credible, consistent, and a predictable product. And that is not happening. And again, I say it not just in Nigeria, but all over the world. And they need to make justice predictable. They need to make justice credible. And I think that's the way they can work themselves back. And also, we should not forget that there are other systems in our culture, in our country, that we can also rely on to give us justice. And I must mention that in the last polling survey we did in Nigeria, it came out clearly, speaking to more than 4,000 Nigerians, that people prefer to go to the informal justice platforms rather than go to the formal courts. That says something about the credibility of the court. That says something about the efficiency of the court, but also gives us an opportunity to begin to look at some of these informal mechanisms of justice that our people go to and see how we can empower those systems to deliver justice for our people.
Quite a number of things to unpack, really, when you talk about the judiciary under this administration, right? But there's this bit I'd like you to speak to, because when you talk about the judiciary getting its act together, some will say, well, under Justice Kekere Ekun, for example, we've seen 3 judges suspended by the NJC. Just some weeks ago, there was that suspension. I don't know if that came as a shock to you or you expect more to be done. We can also talk about the workers in the judiciary. Now, this is not even just the judges. Some will tell you when they have cases, the kind of headache they go through just to secure documents, to have documents submitted, and all of those hurdles, inducements that they are subjected to in the process of seeking justice. So it's almost like there's injustice in the process or in the build-up to injustice. So if you were to have some sort of recommendations now, and I'm not even saying for President Tinubu, because the judiciary is a separate arm of government, is meant to be a separate arm of government. What would be those recommendations?
So, no, thank you. Thank you. I will take this conversation a little bit, make it a little bit broader. You see, the justice system has to be designed for people. And that is what we call people-centered justice. That you design a justice system that is much more focused on people's need, much more focused on people's interests, much more focused on people's acceptance of that system, rather than building institutions. And this is what in my organization we talk about, that it has to be people-centered justice, not institution-centered justice. And so we're having a conversation about 2 years of this administration, and you can see that we're also talking a lot about the institution, but we should be talking also about the people. What is the satisfaction level of Nigerians with the justice system? That, for me, should be the benchmark. Really. It's not whether or not the judges and justices have all they need to do their work, or we have good buildings, we have computers, we have assistants. It's about the satisfaction level of the people. And you and I know that that satisfaction level is not optimal. And to then think of reform, the reform we should be thinking about is a reform that looks at what do people need? How does my auntie who lives in my village interface with the justice system? Is it close to her? Is it accessible to her? Is it understandable to her? 90% of Nigerians, according to our survey, which we did a period of 3 years, talking to the same people over and over again in those 3 years. More than 4,000 Nigerians in 18 states across 6 geopolitical zones. The question is that, the fact is that 90% of Nigerians have justice problem. Now, the critical question is, what is their satisfaction in solving that justice problem? And that is where the challenge starts. Because our justice system is not often designed around people. It's designed around systems and institutions that do not take proper account of the day-to-day justice need of the people. So my recommendation is for us to go back to the drawing board and think critically about people-centered justice, a justice system built on the needs of people, accessible to them, easy for them to understand, and this justice system that they feel they have a stake in, that they own. That would be my recommendation about moving things forward.
Very trite, and evidently the conversation has by no means ended. We must continue to, drum up this and make it alive. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Jude Udo Ilo is the Chief Executive Officer, Hague Institute for Innovation, OG. He has joined us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you.
And this is where we drop the anchor on the show today, a very critical one, reflecting on the gains and the pains, really, of this administration in 2 years.
Certainly. But just before we go, we need to give you updates on that report we brought you earlier on about students in Taraba writing their WAEC examination late in the night. It was an examination, English, I should say. It was an examination that was meant to have started in the morning, but they didn't get their papers up until late, and they had to write the examination. There you see them in Taraba State. So we're meant to be joined by the head of national office of WAEC this morning, just to speak to some of the issues that came up in Taraba State. what happened exactly. A statement has been released, I should say, to that effect, but we're meant to be joined by the head of the Nigerian National Office of West Africa Examinations Council, Dr. Amos Dangote, on this situation, because it touches on the processes of WAEC, just at the time we're trying to recover from the JAM situation, you know, the UTME, the mass failure, the technical issues. I mean, you had the JAM registrar in tears. Right, so what exactly played out here? So we're joined by Dr. Amos Dangote, who is the head of the Nigerian National Office, West Africa Examinations Council. WAEC joins us virtually this morning. Had to join us in his vehicle so we can have this important conversation. Dr. Dangote, you're welcome to the program. Please walk us through what exactly happened. Why did they have to write the examination late in Taraba yesterday? If you can hear me, Dr. Dangote, Taraba, we also hear Ogun State had the same situation. What exactly happened?
Good morning, the presenter, I believe Mr. Kayode, Nigerians. I want to begin by giving unreserved apology for what played out yesterday. Let me quickly shed light on the happenings that led to what played out. It was very unfortunate that we received the information that the paper was being compromised. And so, as an examination body that is credible, that wants to be fair, we went to the drawing board and quickly came up with a solution to the compromised paper. So the preparation for the examination for that paper took off in earnest. We were able to achieve the aim we set out to, that is to prevent leakage. We were able to do that, but unfortunately, some other issues lurking in the dark reared their heads and affected the timely conduct of the examination. And that is particularly with regards to logistics. We had serious logistical problems. And for the vehicle that was conveying the exam material to Taraba, it broke down on the road in the middle of the night. And efforts to ensure that materials were recovered and sent to the place could not be achieved in time. So these were some of the reasons, and I want to say that we deeply regret it, and we have taken all steps necessary to ensure that this is nipped into the bud, doesn't occur again.
All right. Mr. Amos Dangote, we'll have to bring you back again because there are more questions to ask about the process, because this happened not just in Taraba, but in Ogun State as well. But of course, we take your apology and your explanation on this particular one, but we're hoping that this has been done with a promise that you return to provide more clarifications about what is responsible for this particular incident.
May I then talk about that of Ogun State?
Well, Dr. Dangote, because of time, we just wanted to accommodate this bit. We're totally out of time, but we wanted to just represent your thoughts. But we'll have you back to give a comprehensive explanation. We're totally out of time. We've overshot our time. But we have to thank you, at least for this preliminary update. We've been speaking with Dr. Amos Dangote, head of the Nigerian National Office, West Africa Examinations Council. Had to join us in his vehicle, and we had to accommodate him under short notice because of the situation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kayode.
Well, definitely, we'll be coming back to this issue, but we have to anchor at this point. We have a big day for you, Sunrise Daily, and of course, our big show later today. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow. I am Bukola Koka.
Bye.